Hello and welcome to another episode of Mattanory. I'm going to read you a Wassail song as it's old 12th night today, so I hope you enjoy this one. It's called The Appletree Man. There once was an old farmer who had two sons. The elder was hard working and thoughtful in his words and deeds. He had a love for the land, of nature and the old ways, which made his life rich. His pockets never jangled with coins, but he never really minded about that. And the younger son was very different. He was spoiled and greedy. He expected everything to be done the way he wanted, and he had little honour about him. And the two brothers had no love for one another. The old man died one year in high spring, and it was the custom in that part of the country that the youngest son got all the inheritance, the big house, everything in it, all the land and all the animals. He made a great play of giving bits and pieces to his wider family, but he also delighted in his new power to make his elder brother feel very small and worthless. His brother got the cast-offs and worn-out things, his dad's old moth-eared donkey, an ox that had all gone to skeleton and saws, and a tumble-down old shack and outhouse with a scant bit of grass, and two or three grown-in old apple trees, all nearby. It was all that remained of an orchard that his father and grandfather, where they had once lived, had made. So he had this small cottage, but it was only rented to him. The younger brother made sure he always got the rent in full, and he had to take it out to the big house on time every month. It wasn't the best situation, but the elder brother didn't grumble. He rolled up his sleeves and set to work. He went out along the lanes to cut lush grass for the two animals, and he cut ash, elm, holly, and ivy for leaf fodder. He gathered the gentler healing herbs from the springtime hedgerow, clovers, goosegrass, bird's foot trefoil, and he made sure there were plenty for the animals to eat. The ox and the donkey began to fatten up and brighten up nicely, and with advice from a local wise woman, he sought out burdock, comfrey, and nettle, and he mashed them into a poultice to put on the poor old ox's sores, saying the right words as he did so. That old ox picked himself up and walked smart and strong. He then turned the beasts into the orchard, and all the goodness and herb magic, well, naturally it came out the other end, and it treated the lands, and the gnarly old apple trees flourished a marvel. The trees were struggling under the weight of mistletoe, though, so he cut a lot of the good mistletoe to sell at the market the following winter. He then carefully pruned the apple trees, which would strengthen them in time, but he knew it would take years before they fruited well again. None of this helped the elder brother get his rent together and look after himself, and his life became more and more difficult. He did some work up the farm next door, but it didn't bring much in. And by the end of the second year, he had used any savings he had, and it was barely scraping together enough money to pay for rent and food. Then one day, his younger brother came along the first time he'd ever visited his siblings' home since their father died. He said, "It'll be Twelvy night soon, when they say the beasts can talk at midnight. I've heard them tell down in the village that there's some treasure round here somewhere. And so I'm set to ask your donkey when he can talk. I reckon he's got more brains than the other one. He'll know that he has to tell me the truth, if he knows what's good for him, because I'm the owner of this place." The donkey and the ox both stopped munching on their hay and eyed him suspiciously, but he didn't notice. The younger brother poked the elder in the ribs, little more than playfully. "It'll be lucky for you, because if you come up to the house and wake me before midnight on old Twelvy night, so that I can come and listen to the animals, I'll take sixpence off your rent for the end of January. But if you don't wake me, well, I might as well find myself a new tenant. Got that?" And he walked off whistling a little tune. So Christmas had come. That was a soggy affair that year. And then by the time the sun had gone down as low in the sky as it would get, the celebrations were due, the new year came. But the constant rain had soaked all the cheer out of the elder brother. So on Twelvy night, he determined to do something about it. That evening, he went out to the shed and gave the donkey and the ox a little bit of extra food. And he opened the kitchen cupboard and got out the last bit of the last year's cider. He mulled the cider over a little ashwood fire, using bits of cinnamon and clove, and he poured it into his mug and took it outside to the orchard. It was still slating with rain and perishing cold, and the water soon ran in rivers down the elder brother's neck and into his raggedy shirt. But no matter. He went up to the biggest and oldest of the apple trees, poured a hard crust of bread from his pocket and dunked it into the cider, and put the soaked bread into the crook of one of the tree's branches. And then he started to sing, "O apple tree, I wassail thee, and hoping thou wilt bear, for the lady knows where we shall be till apples come next year." He tipped the last of the cider at the roots of the tree and continued, "For to bear well and to bloom well, so merry let us be. Let every man take off his hat and shout to the old apple tree. Hats full, caps full, 3 bushel bags full, and a girt heap under the stairs. Hooray!" This last year came from the elder brother's mouth, sounding rather small in the cold rain, and he didn't have the heart to cheer any more. The rain carried on, and he found himself looking at the apple tree, all its cracked bark and awkward branches and globs of mistletoe, and wondering just how long it had been growing there and what it must have seen. Then a voice came, a dry, cracked voice. "Ah, that were a drop of old good." The older brother looked round. He was sure there was nobody else in the orchard. He looked back at the apple tree and watched as the fissures in the trunk of the old apple tree gnarled themselves up into a huge barky grin, with 2 knots in the wood for beady, pippy eyes. "Come on, now ye take a look under this diggity root of ours. There be treasure right over there," said the apple tree man, and he waved his branches over to the middle of the orchard. The eldest brother wasted no time in finding a spade and dug in the spot, and it wasn't long before the spade hit metal, and up came a box full of shining gold coins. "'Tis yours and no one else's," said the apple tree man. "Put 'en away safe, and bide quiet about 'em." The old brother hauled the metal box into an old sack and took it back to his little shack, where he hid it in the kitchen cupboard. He then returned to the apple tree and said his thanks. "'Tis a pleasure," said the apple tree man. "Now go call your dear brother, for 'tis nearly midnight." So the elder brother went to wake his younger brother at the big house, and when that was done, he went back to his kitchen, took the sack of gold and a few of his belongings, and started up the road to seek a new life. Meanwhile, the bleary-eyed younger brother hurried through the pouring rain up to the orchard and into the old cattle shed. Just as the church clock struck midnight, he stood closest to the faces of the donkey and the ox and looked at them expectantly, with his teeth clattering in his head from the cold. Sure enough, after some time, the donkey turned to the ox and said, "You'd know this, girt greedy fool. That's a listening to we so unmannerly. He'd want us to tell where treasure is." "And that's where he won't never get it," said the ox, "'cause someone's a tooked it already." Wassail.